Welcome back. Now, the Caribbean is one of the world's favourite tourist destinations, with millions heading there for sun, sea and sand every year. But there's a growing movement to transform its reputation from that of a pleasure seeker's paradise to a hub of the African diaspora. Later this month, Barbados will host the annual African Diaspora Heritage Trail Conference. Its roots lie in the drive from the Bermudan government to attract visitors interested in the island's African heritage and its heroes.
Her story is as striking as the new statue in her honor. Sally Bassett is Bermuda's most often told slave story.
I see her as a hero, I really do.
Sally Bassett was tied, shackled, and burned at the stakes. It was a public execution of a grandmother. Many bore witness. Bermuda's Chief Justice ordered the execution following a trial for petty treason. Sally was accused of trying to poison 2 slave owners in 1730. She was a criminal, but history has ordained her as a hero.
How could a woman who was treated in such a way be a villain? To me, it doesn't make sense. I mean, I don't approve of violence in any form, but I do feel that defending yourself is human.
The state that executed her now honors her. The Sally Bassett Monument is on the same grounds as the country's highest elected office.
In all countries, the people who emerge from their history as heroes are the people who stuck to their guns by their important principles.
The Bermuda government kept registers for slaves like Sally. Those registers now open to the world. All over Bermuda, Black history is highlighted no matter how unpleasant. It's the promise of the African Diaspora Heritage Trail, a trail that now includes a monument to an enslaved Bermudian, a woman standing as proudly, as defiantly as she lived. Music has filled Sunday mornings here for almost 200 years. And for just as long, proud parishioners have flocked to fill the pews. It's not enough to know the hymns at Cobb's Hill Methodist Church. You're also expected to know the history. To build this one-room church, slaves labored at night. By day, they were beholden to the masters. Nightly, up this narrow pathway, they painstakingly carried stones, sometimes on their backs. The short road is now fittingly renamed. It took 2 years of moonlit nights, and Sunday mornings have been something special ever since.
This church was built by slaves at night. That's the part that touches my heart, that they want to worship God, and they use the moonlight to build this church.
Holy, holy, holy. Like the parishioners here, historians consider Cobb's Hill Methodist Church a remarkable place. They've made it part of the African Diaspora Heritage Trail, ensuring a centuries-old nighttime achievement is forever in the spotlight.
Danny Glover reporting there. Danny Glover reporting for Vox Africa on the Bermudan Heritage Trail. Well, one man who'll be heading off to Barbados for their Heritage Trail Conference is the filmmaker Rashid Nix, and he's with us in the studio. Rashid, welcome to the programme.
Mr. Bonsu, pleasure to see you again.
Now, tell us about this conference, the Heritage Trail, and just why it's important enough for you to lift yourself up from Brixton and go down there to Barbados.
Well, this being 2012, and the world is an ever-shrinking entity.
Yeah.
It seems as if everyone's making these links on an international basis, except for a lot of the time us guys who are here in the UK, which is a centre, a hub for flight, for economics, and we're not taking our place. Mm-hmm. So for me personally, I mean, not saying that the black man in the UK has passed his sell-by date, right, but it's time to look forward. We've got to be visionary. So I'm saying, well, here's Garvey on my finger. Right. It's my Garvey ring, and let's take these ideals and let's link up with brothers from the Caribbean, from Africa, from North America, and let's take this thing to the next level.
Well, you're a filmmaker. You're not a tourism or a heritage expert, are you? So what are you going to go to film?
Okay, well, for me personally, because it's a way for me to just get out of the UK for, a week. So
I think you have roots in Barbados too.
I have roots in Barbados, absolutely. But I'm really going there to just connect with brothers and sisters, obviously.
Okay.
Yeah, to make sure. and to find some like-minded, progressive people. Because, like I said, sometimes, you know, what we find here in London, London is very London-centric.
Yeah.
You know, UK is very UK-centric. So we don't really see what's happening, you know, outside in the big wide world. You know, planet Earth is 196,940,000 square miles total surface area. Brixton is like 1 square mile, so we got to think on a different level, you know.
Okay, and explain then this desire to shift and change the way in which the Caribbean is seen. Probably one as a tourist destination, and two as a hub of African history.
Well, essentially, you know, the people of the Caribbean, we have a very rich, very, you know, diverse background, but we are primarily an African people. You know, we might have different shades, but we are an African people. Something like Barbados. Barbados is over 90% of the people there, you can say these are African people.
Yeah.
You might have a little indigenous, some Asian in there, but they're African people.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, you know, I can't really read too much into what the officials are saying, but, you know, sometimes you say we need to celebrate the fact that we are an African people.
Yeah.
And we need to connect on that level of Africanness, as opposed to trying to run away from. Let's go back and let's deal with some of this stuff. So Barbados being an island which is very steeped in the history of slavery and colonization, you know, from 1627, Barbados has been an English colony, nearly 400 years. But you're dealing with an African people. But the mentality, you know, is trying to grasp, are we African people? Are we an Indian? Are we an Indian people? Are we an English people? So this, I think, is, you know, their way of saying, let's embrace our Africanness.
And this is the 8th such Heritage Trail Conference in the Caribbean. I'm just wondering what's coming out of them, because of course we saw with the Bermudan one, which I think hosted them in 2009, they talked about the Sally Bassett and talked about the church, and these are things that people can go and see as well as lying on the beach. What about in the case of Barbados or other parts of the Caribbean? How do you rebrand what's attractive about that place?
Well, if you look at the history of commerce with the Caribbean, you know, it was always around people. You know, either you were buying and selling people, people were producing, you know, the produce which allowed, you know, Europe to develop. And then once we get into independence, 1960s, the Caribbean sort of rebrands itself as this tourist destination where you can come and lie on a beach and have some black people come and maybe serve you with a tray. So it's like you relive your fantasy of, you know, the old colonial days, which is okay. That has its place if that's what you're into. However, there is definitely a growing movement of people who are saying, well, listen, you know, slavery was abolished 200 years ago. We are an African people. We need to really look at our heritage and our culture and get away from this idea of buckets and spades tourism, and maybe let's, you know, look at our culture as something which can be marketed and which we can rally around and come together. Because if you have a cultural exchange, there must be at some point an economic exchange. There should be a political exchange as well.
I'm just wondering what kind of tourist, what kind of traveller would be attracted by that change in emphasis. Debbie, would you be attracted? And of course, you have Caribbean roots yourself, Guyana. I'm wondering if Guyana is going to be on the African Diaspora Heritage Trail, maybe host it in Georgetown.
That would be great, I think, but just going back to what you're saying, I think because of my involvement in carnival arts, it's easier for me to transpose what you were saying into to Trinidad. That's like my home in the Caribbean. And I think what Trinidad have been successful in doing is building their tourism around their arts and around carnival. And there are thousands of people that go down for carnival every year. And for a lot of the bands that take part in carnival up here, and it's important to give young people here the opportunity to go down, and what we found is, as well as kind of developing their technical skills, like if they play in a steel band or play pan, to be able to go down and play in a band down there kind of helps. It also gives them a self of sense. For a lot of them, they've grown up here. They, you know, some people, you know, grow up in Ladbroke Grove and never leave Ladbroke Grove. And to be able to take them somewhere else where they can experience different things and realise and be part of something where they're not the minority and can have that sense of pride. But what Trinidad have been successful in doing is building it around their tourism, because Trinidad isn't a very glamorous place. Tobago's the tourist hub, but Trinidad itself isn't that glamorous. But they've been able to use their arts and their culture and kind of celebrate that and use that as a thing that they're building on.
But Debbie, you're preempting beautifully our final feature on Education Africa teaching, so don't go too far on that line. But it's beautiful, it's really important. What about Sierra Leone? Because of course, people know your country for a number of reasons, one of which was of course the large export of Africans to the Americas and the Caribbean. Are you able to present yourself and brand yourself as part of this African Diaspora Heritage Trail? Because Lagos has done so.
I very much agree and appreciate what both of you have said. I think this is 2012, we're going to 2013.
Yeah.
I think it's high time we started displaying, exposing our culture, our richness, our potentials in various forms, like the carnival as we do in Britain, and what you're going to do in the Barbados. And a lot of African countries are doing the same thing. But what concerns me most is we talk about African Caribbean or Afro-Caribbean.
Yeah.
What concerns me is how do we merge the mentality there or the connection? Because what basically happens in this country, I think charity begins at home.
Yeah.
What basically happens in Britain, whatever you say, it was Peter Tosh who said, no matter where you come from, as long as you're a black man, you're an African. And we appreciate that. But whatever you say, there is some sort of a little bit cultural difference between people from the African continent and people from the Caribbean.
Isn't that to be expected? It's taken 400 years, of separation to develop
I'm talking about what is happening in Britain.
Okay.
What we should try to do, what we should try to do, and that is being used against us in a naive way. When, to some of us or to some other people, politicians, when it suits them, they call us African Caribbeans.
Yeah.
And in those circumstances, they call us Africans or they call us Caribbeans or whatever. And like in America, they've solved that. Every black person, no matter what generation, they call themselves African American.
Right, okay.
I think
is
we
this
should
the kind
try
of thing,
to coin
Rashid,
something in this country.
Rashid, is this the kind of thing that will be discussed in Barbados, you think?
Absolutely. I mean, the theme of the concert, the conference is to uncover and to really, rediscover and explore our Africanness. So that's a major theme. But I mean, I take issue with one of the things you're saying about the idea of the black Americans seeing themselves as African Americans. If you go to the United States, you will see such different levels of how black people are living. The group that people like Condoleezza Rice represents and the group that are down here in the ghetto, they might not agree upon anything at all, much less, their identity. And I would also say that in terms of a European identity, French don't see themselves as being British. British don't see themselves as being German. They had tribal wars that happened in the last century, killed millions of themselves, but they never call it a tribal war. But if Germans are fighting British or fighting the French or fighting the Italian, that's a tribal conflict on a mass scale.
Right,
so they have their differences.
No, basically,
we can't go any further.
Sorry,
you guys have kind of talked yourself out now. Just quickly, for those people who may be very interested and may want to go to Barbados, it's still 2 weeks to go, isn't it?
There's still a couple of weeks. The conference is the 17th to the 19th of September, which is Monday to the Wednesday. If you go to the website, which is www.adht Barbados, not ADHD.
Yes.
Okay, right.
Barbados.com,
and you can still register. And really, if you're thinking, the way I'm thinking, we now got to take this thing a little bit more global. We now got to start moving. You can get package tours to go to any part of the planet Earth, but for some reason, when it comes down to getting the important stuff done, we always seem to, not a pun, but we always miss the boat.
All right. Thank you very much, Rashid, Debbie, and Columba, for coming in. It's brilliant.
Thank you.